Now, the transgender rapist who sparked a huge debate about prison safety was today sentenced. Isla Bryson has been jailed for 8 years. A judge said, "You see yourself as the victim in this case. You are not." The 31-year-old was convicted last month of raping 2 women in Scotland while they were known as Adam Graham and only changed gender waiting to stand trial. Bryson met both victims online, with prosecutors saying the rapist preyed on vulnerable women. The case sparked national outcries after it was revealed the offender was housed in a female prison while waiting sentencing. The public backlash eventually led to Bryson being moved to a men's jail. An urgent review was ordered, and a change in policy means newly convicted trans prisoners will be placed in jails according to the gender of their birth. This was an interesting case. This is a man who raped 2 women, not a woman who raped 2 women. It was a man who raped 2 women. We can argue about the inadequacy of the sentence here. I mean, 8 years strikes me as woeful. I was staggered to read this. I thought the only bit of the judgment, James, that really kind of made sense to me and resonated was the judge making this point about you are not the victim here, because there was this sense, following some of the headlines, that this person was somehow being victimised over all this, who very conveniently changed their gender during a court case.
Well, exactly. And look, this is hugely problematic for a number of reasons. And we all know the discussions that take place. But I think in a situation like this, you have to move yourself away from those genuine discussions that need to happen to make sure that people who need to be respected and looked after during a process, compared to those who are either gaming the system or alternatively, as you say, this is very clear. This offence took place whilst they were a man, and by the way, they haven't had any of the surgery in order to change them from a man. So, in my view, we've got to stop mucking around with this kind of subject on the basis that if somebody is struggling with their gender and they are trying to change it, then of course we need to make sure that that journey is not more difficult than it can or should be. That having been said, you've got to make sure that people are safe. And I don't care who you are, what you are. If you have abused people and that trust, you have to make sure that it's not about just your safety during the process. It's also about the safety of those around you. That's right.
And there was a sense of fear in this. I thought anyway, and who knows what goes on in the minds of somebody capable of those kind of crimes, but there was a sense that the judge made that comment about the victim, that this person had somehow thought that the change in the gender thing would somehow alter their status, the severity of the crime, their intent, their backstory, as if they were a confused person. It wasn't real. It was almost, it felt like an attempt to dilute it.
To me, it feels like it was an attempt to evade justice. And this person is, quite frankly, at it. They're at it. Completely at it. And it was an attempt to make this all about themselves, so we can talk about the vulnerabilities, we can talk about their, you know, there was an element of victimhood, the childhood that they've been through, and that how that might affect them. But also, remember, this person's also saying that they would never hurt another human being. They didn't do anything. Well, if you didn't do anything, why are you doing all this to evade justice? Like I said, they're at it. The crimes that they committed when they were a man are absolutely awful. They should be judged as such. I think 8 years for 2 rapes is absolutely ridiculous.
But I think we all agree with you. I think we all know it's a shocking crime. We also know she is now at high risk of reoffending. I think that's what the judgment said as well. At the weekend, excuse me, I interviewed Dominic Raab, Deputy Prime Minister, also Minister for Justice, and actually I said to him he'd given urgent clarification to where we are. And I think you're right, James, is that we've been dancing around this issue for far too long. And actually what Dominic Raab has said is that if you are a trans woman and you are guilty of a violent or a sexual offence, or indeed if you have external male genitalia, then you go to a male prison. And for once, I think that is common sense prevailing. And it's actually much needed clarification, not only for the prison service, but for the judiciary as well. And I think it's really welcome.
Can I also sort of, I know I've said it before, but I do want to say it again. There is something really unpleasant if you have been raped by somebody, hearing them described in court as she. And you know, I know they're going to say, you know, it's a chosen pronoun by the person themselves. But there's something, if you have been raped and all of a sudden you're saying she did this and she did that when he was a male, I do think it's
But
extraordinarily
that terminology
difficult.
changed during the court case.
But that's
so
right.
these
But
lawyers
can you
were
imagine?
referring to this he.
So,
and
so,
then
so
suddenly
there's a
switched
really,
it to a
but there's a
she.
really important point here, and this is why the Gender Recognition Reform Act Scotland is such a mess. Now, as you know, the British government then invoked Section 35 on that, because what they're allowing is for people to self-determine without a medical diagnosis, and so therefore, and going back to your point, you can game the system, and that I think is what we're seeing in that case.
Yeah.